Amazing.
Amazing. I'll take that.
Okay.
Amazing, hilarious,
Yes.
handsome man. Yeah.
Welcome back to Show and Teller. I'm so happy that you're here tuning in again for another amazing episode. I have a very special guest who's joining us today. And honestly, I've heard so many incredible things about our guest. I'm going to introduce you in about a second. And here at Show and Teller, we try to bring in people who have an incredible story, somebody who's overcome challenges, somebody who's pushing the envelope, somebody who's pushing barriers. And I think our guest today is an exemplary example of that. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Shabbos Kestenbaum. Shabbos, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I really do appreciate having you here. And I meant what I said. I'm looking forward to asking you questions today as if I don't know you, because I know you, I've heard stories, but I at the same time want to delve deep into who you are, your stories, get a little bit into the kishkas, the neshama of who you are, the soul of Shabbos Kestenbaum. So
let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's dive right in. Shabbos, tell us a little bit about you. Where are you from? What's your story? What's your background? Which then will lead you to where you're at today.
Sure. So fairly typical American Jew in the sense of I was born and raised in Riverdale, New York. I'm from a family of 7, which is fairly typical for the Orthodox religious observant family I'm from. Went to Jewish day school, Jewish summer camp. After high school, I went to an all-male Orthodox yeshiva that I think you went to as well, Eshet Torah, right next to the Western Wall.
How long were you there for?
I was there for 2 years. And that was certainly a formidable moment, transformative moment in my life. After yeshiva, I went back to New York and decided I wanted to work in Jewish education. So I got hired. I was 19 or 20 at the time, did not have a college degree, but I had passion. And I started working in Jewish formal education. It then
in what way were you doing?
2 organizations. One is the National Council of Synagogue Youth, NCSY. The other was, and that's the informal part, the other was a formal school, SAR Academy. I was teaching 5th grade Judaic studies, and I really enjoyed it. Again, I didn't really have any credentials or experience, but I did have a sense of purpose, which I felt was my North Star, being part of the Jewish people and influencing the next generation of Jews.
So already at that stage, were you saying, this is going to be my life purpose going forward? I want to be involved in the Jewish community, somehow educating.
Yeah, and in fact, just a few nights ago, I was asked by someone, where do I see myself in 10 years? And I said, professionally, I'm not entirely sure, but what I do know is whatever it manifests as, it will be in service of the American Jewish community. This is the community I was born and raised in, the community I know and love, and I want to give back, and more than give back, I also want to ensure its continuity. So after working in Jewish formal schooling, the principal of the school basically said, look, we'd love to have you permanently, but you should probably get a college degree. It's, just for your future professional ambitions, it's not good to not have any credentials. It looks good on the resume.
Yes.
So I wasn't particularly interested, especially because I already had a job and I already was working. So I figured,
you were making a living and you were paying the bills.
So I said, okay, well, if I'm going to go to college, I'll do it as quickly as possible and as cheap as possible. So I enrolled at Queens College. And Queens College, which is part of the City University of New York school system.
Also known as SUNY.
CUNY. The SUNY is the state university system. CUNY is the city university, but it's the same idea.
Us LA folk, we don't, you have to educate us.
I won't hold it against you.
Okay, thank you.
But when I started, and clearly this was divinely ordained, 2 weeks after I started, the COVID-19 pandemic began, and my entire schooling was shifted online. And I did my entire bachelor's in a year. It was not particularly difficult because it was all online anyway. And I even remember...
So that was around the clock? You were just on Zoom, basically?
I mean, I'll put it this way. I was living in New York City. The entire city was on lockdown. It's not like I had a social life because everyone was back home with their parents. So the only thing I really had to do was school. And as I said, it was not particularly difficult to do 4 years in 1 year simply because everything was online at the point and you could take asynchronous classes. So it was funny because I remember in order to pick up my diploma when I graduated a year earlier, they said, well, pick it up at Kaplan Hall. And I remember thinking to myself, what the hell is Kaplan Hall? Because I'd never been on the campus. And after I had gotten the degree, I kind of thought to myself, look, I studied religious studies. I've always been interested in studying religion from an academic, pluralistic setting, in addition to, of course, the orthodox biases and religious devotion I have. And I thought to myself, look, I don't really have a college experience. I did it kind of quickly because I figured I was having a job anyway. I think I owe it to myself while I'm still young. I'm not married. I don't have many responsibilities. What if I really pursue the study of religion from a serious academic lens? And
Let me stop you for a second.
Yep.
Religious studies, that's studying all religions from across the world.
Correct.
And like getting a pretty comprehensive education on all
Correct.
of that.
Because to me, the study of theology is not merely the study of religion or God or the divine. It's the study of history. It's the study of anthropology. It's sociology. There's so many aspects confined within religion. It's so encompassing. And typically, if you're an Orthodox man and you want to study religion, well, the answer is, well, just go to yeshiva and get rabbinic ordination. The answer is not go to a pluralistic, non-sectarian, diverse divinity school with women and gays and Muslims, and almost none of them believe in God. So when I was applying, I only knew of 3 other Orthodox people who had gone to a divinity school. All 3 of them were women, and they all told me not to do it. And in particular, they told me not to go to Harvard Divinity School in particular, because Harvard Divinity School, leaving aside the antisemitism, was known as an institution that really lacked serious and rigorous academic discourse as it pertains to religion.
Even though it says Harvard.
Even though it says Harvard. And by the way, that's true for a lot of the Harvard schools that have been running on their reputation for the last 100 years as opposed to their actual qualitative worth. And I was told.
So you applied?
So I applied. I don't really remember why.
Even though people were telling you this is not going to cut it.
Yeah, because I was politically pretty left, and I figured, there's this wokeism, there's the DEI, there's this anti-Israel undercurrent. But if they just got to know me, and if they just got to realize, like, listen, I voted for Bernie Sanders twice, and I also marched at the Supreme Court when Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I took a knee for Black Lives Matter, and I knocked on doors for Barack Obama's campaign when I was 9 years old. If they got to know all that, and then they knew that I was pro-Israel, then, I could change them. They just had to know me better. So, number one, I wasn't...
Ambitious, I have to say.
Yes. So, number one, I wasn't particularly concerned about the politics, because in many cases, I actually agreed with their politics. And number two, I figured, well, if I'm there, or if there's an Orthodox presence, maybe we could move the needle just a little. And evidently they were right, and I was very wrong. But point being, I don't remember where I got the idea of Harvard Divinity School in particular. I was probably just attracted to the idea of Harvard. I applied to Yale Divinity School as well. And interestingly, I got totally rejected from Yale. And Harvard, they gave me a full scholarship and then actually gave me a stipend to actually go. So they were paying me to go to the university. And so I always joke, I don't know if Harvard was anti-Semitic before I enrolled, but they're certainly anti-Semitic after, because they figured we gave this Jew thousands of dollars to study here, and he's thanking us by suing us, which I always thought was a fun historical
But we'll get
irony.
to that. We'll get to that. We're jumping ahead.
Yes, okay, sorry. Jumping ahead here.
It's okay. So that's fascinating, really fascinating. And what I'm hearing from that is that basically what was going to come from this is that you wanted to get a pluralistic Jewish education, and the goal was to make a difference somehow and educate. And did you see, as you were starting off on this journey, again, I'm asking a similar question, what the end goal was going to be, or was it?
Yeah, well, first of all, it wasn't just about moving the needle. That was also an important component, but it was also like I genuinely did have an interest in learning from other faiths, other cultures, other backgrounds, which is why I would go to the Muslim Student Association halakha events on Fridays. I would go to the Mormon group readings. I would go to the Jews for Palestine Liberation events.
And you found this fascinating?
Yeah, not because I agreed with them. I did not, let me be clear. And an Orthodox Jew should probably not be going to those places. And had I asked a rabbi or my rabbis back at Aish, they probably would have been against the idea of an Orthodox Jewish person being part of these environments. So I'm not encouraging people to do it. But I did have, from an intellectual level, a fascination with just other faiths and why do they believe what they believe and why do they practice what they practice. So in addition to, yes, I wanted to contribute to this discourse, I also wanted to learn from the discourse. And as it pertains to my professional ambitions, I always joke that the only thing you could do with a degree in divinity is apply for unemployment benefits. It's not a very practical degree. It's not like if someone has a heart attack 30,000 feet up in the air, someone says, quick, we need someone with a master's in theology. So I just said, look, this is a point in my life where I want to devote 2-3 years to just studying religion. As I said, I don't have responsibilities. No one's really counting on me to do anything. I'm doing it for purely self-interest reasons. And I thought that was okay. But in terms of long-term, yeah, I liked the idea of education. I probably would have done that. And then October 7th happens, and then, as I'm sure we'll talk about, my professional ambitions changed quite dramatically.
How old are you now?
25.
25. Such a young man. Accomplished
Thank
a lot.
you. Yes, appreciate it.
Okay, so then you go through how many years at Harvard Divinity School?
I do 2 years. And interestingly, my last year, I was applying to the law school, and I had gotten letters of recommendations from my professors, and I was putting together my application, and October 7th hits. And then I basically just drop it and say, I'm going to do 2 years and 2 years only.
Before October 7th hits, social life, what was your social life like? What was your extracurricular activities on the Harvard campus?
You sound like my shadchan. It was very heavily involved with Chabad in particular. One of my points of pride is I'm not the most religiously observant dude in the world, but every morning at Harvard Chabad, we have a prayer corps, and we have Shacharis, a minyan, and it started about, I think, officially 8 o'clock, but practically closer to 9 o'clock. And there would always be exactly 10 people. We didn't always have a ton of people.
You made the minyan.
And I, as a source of pride, I was very proud of the fact, and I said this openly, that I may not be the most observant dude, but every day I was at that minyan, I could be counted to be one of the 10, and that gave me structure, it gave me community, it gave me a purpose, and it was an excellent way of starting the day. And when I look back at the things I've done at Harvard, honestly, more than the lawsuit, I'm way more proud of the fact that I helped make a minyan every single day with the Chabad.
And that was actually my next question, is that, when there's so many other people that are doing other things around the campus, whether that's a fraternity, whether that's going out, socializing, having fun, was it difficult to maintain a level of Jewish observance while on a campus which is not YU or another type of yeshiva? How were you able to maintain your Judaism?
Yeah, well, I'll answer the first part first, which is to validate it. I spoke at the RCA, the Rabbinical Conference of America, last year, and I never prepare my speeches because it has to be in Hebrew, davar yotze min halev, from the heart. And as I was walking to the podium, I figured I would just do the classic anti-Semitism spiel. And then I realized, look, I'm in front of like 200 American rabbis. And I said as follows. I said, forget about anti-Semitism and forget about October 7th. One, as an Orthodox Jew, needs to realize, as an Orthodox rabbi, there is a profound crisis of faith that young American Jews experience on secular campuses. And again, irrespective of anti-Semitism, it's a really challenging environment. And certainly there are Jewish individuals who can thrive and grow in their Judaism on those environments in the same way that there are certainly people who can play for the NBA. It happens. I'm not sure how many people it happens to, but it does happen. And I was telling these rabbinic figures, many of whom are in really prominent positions, is you have to understand that these environments denigrate and scorn and challenge and humiliate the religious values that we as young people had grown up with and that our parents invested time, resources, and money so that we would feel an affinity toward. So it's very, very difficult to retain one's level of religious observance, certainly to actually grow in their levels of observance, which is, again, why I felt that going to a minyan every single day was so important, because it grounded me. And yeah, when you're at Harvard in particular, you're being bombarded with dozens of events every single day. At one morning, you could be with the Prime Minister of Albania, and an hour later, you'll be meeting with Bill Gates's second-hand man. I mean, there's so many different opportunities, and if you're religious, you can get lost and fall through the cracks. And that's not just true of Jews. I gained a close friendship with many devout Christians and Mormons on Harvard's campus, and we would all kind of say the exact same thing. And divinity school, ironically, perhaps more than any other school at Harvard. Harvard has 13 schools, the law school, medical school, college, divinity school. Probably the most difficult to be religiously observant, because very few people take the Bible, or the Hebrew Bible at least, as the word of God. And more than that, it's a tool at which you can implant your political narrative on. So the Hebrew Bible is now an area in which you have to decolonize, you have to de-queer, you have to destructure, and it just became an object of scorn. And that was really difficult, which is why I actually wrote an article for Aish.com entitled Antisemitism at Harvard. And I wrote it in October of 2022. A year before October 7th, saying like, there are these pervasive issues that no one really seems to address here. I'll give you one last example. I'm sorry, because I give long answers. The Harvard Divinity School.
Great.
Oh, thank you.
I'm riveted right
Appreciate
now.
it. The Harvard Divinity School has what's called noon service. And noon service is, I don't think they use the word religion, because I don't think that's politically correct. I think they use the word faith-based tradition. But essentially, they'll get a different religion each week to present something of their faith. And it was just silly. It was just a mockery. They would have the Prison Abolitionist Society. They would have the feminists making midrash. They would have the Jews for Palestine liberation. It was just silly. And I strongly believe if you're a Catholic, go to church, go to Mass. And if you're a Jew, go to synagogue. And if you're a Muslim, go to the mosque. Like, be proud and confident of your faith. But to simply hijack your faith for political purposes is such a disservice at best to your own religion. You know, if you're a Muslim, I want you to be a practicing Muslim who's proud and confident of your values and not trying to acquiesce to secular liberal values. And what I felt what Harvard Divinity School was normalizing and encouraging students to do.
So what do you think that is? I mean, this is an off-topic question, but it has to do. Why do you think people hijack their faith and make it about politics?
I think it's because they have very little faith, and they have a lot of politics, and they have a lot of ideologies, and it's very convenient to use faith as the platform by which you can express your political narratives. There was a joke that the people at Harvard Divinity School are simply the rejects from the Harvard Kennedy School. Harvard Kennedy School is the school of government and public policy, and people really want to do that. And when they don't get into that, okay, fine, I'll do the religion thing, and I can sort of capitalize my politics with religion. That's obviously an unfair generalization, and there are certainly many devout people at Harvard Divinity School. But in my personal experience, I unfortunately met all too many students who used faith as a pretext for their very, very far left political agenda. And that's a conversation that the Divinity School is aware of, but they're not really willing to do anything about it because most of the faculty kind of agree with it. And the encampments happen to be a perfect example. The encampments, when all these students lived in tents and refused to shower for 4 weeks, it smelled terrible, to call for an intifada. You know, there were professors who took part in the encampments. Maybe give some
background, because maybe if people have been under a rock or something like that, what are you referring to?
So the encampment started at Columbia University, and it caught on like wildfire across college campuses in the United States.
What month did it start?
Yeah, this started the day Manu Shafiq, who was the then president of Columbia University, gave her congressional testimony. So it was around Passover, which...
Passover 2024?
Yeah, which I think was April.
So let's talk to the audience a little bit. So, because I think it's important to just give a little bit historical of what took place. October 7th, 2023 happened. Mm-hmm. It was... We talked about it many times on the show. It was the biggest massacre in Israel that took place probably since the Holocaust happened.
Well, it was the biggest single-day massacre in Israel's history, and it was
1,200
correct
Jews had been murdered,
and it was the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And
which is why some political commentators will say this was Israel's 9/11, because this was the single largest terrorist attack in Israel's history. And on a per capita basis, in the United States, roughly 3,000, I think it was 2,997 people were killed on 9/11 out of a population at the time of like 300 million. Israel has a population of roughly 9 million. So 1,200 of 9 million is the equivalent
percentage.
The equivalent of, let's say, 30 9/11s.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
Huge. So October 7th happens, and we see a tremendous rise in anti-Semitism around the world that took place since October 7th. And where we see that is one of the main pervasive places that we saw a huge rise in anti-Semitism was on college campuses. So Shabbos, before we get to what took place in, you said, in 2024 in Columbia University, what happened October 7th, 2023 on the Harvard campus? Were you there when that happened?
Yeah, of course. I remember where I was. I was at Harvard Chabad. And there were 34 student groups at Harvard University, from the Feminist Society to the Muslim Student Association to, I think, like the Bengali Dance Association or something. And on the night of October 7th, as they're watching the images of, Jewish women bleeding from their private areas and of Jewish babies like Fia and Ariel crying as they're being hoarded onto motorcycles and deported into Gaza by strangers, as they're watching the images of like these mangled, charred, burnt bodies in cars, the immediate reaction of the most elite, the most progressive, the most sensitive, the most educated in our society, at least allegedly, Harvard, on the night of October 7th. This is not 4 months after the fact. This is not when Israel began its genocide. This was on the night of October 7th, before there was any response. 34 student groups, including many Jewish groups, they jumped out of bed and they drafted what they called an emergency statement to blame Jews for the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. The statement literally begins, "We hold the Israeli apartheid regime entirely responsible for all ongoing violence in the Middle East." No condemnation or even mention of Hamas. And that is what began an almost surreal experience that I still have trouble processing.
Like, you couldn't believe what you were seeing.
Could not believe it. And in fact,
the place that is supposed to be the most tolerant, that the most educated, as you said, is completely condoning this behavior.
And at the Harvard Divinity School WhatsApp group, before they kicked me out, again, on the night of October 7th, I didn't realize this at the time because it was a Jewish holiday.
No time of mourning, no nothing.
The night of October 7th, students in the Harvard Divinity School WhatsApp group, and I'll show you the screenshots, were creating posters for protests or rallies they were organizing, and one sign was, "Victory is ours. Glory to the resistance." Another student asked...
Completely justifying it.
Justifying, celebrating it. "Victory is ours. Glory to the resistance." Another student said, "Can I bring my dog to the rally? Can I help make signs?" It was insane. And again, on a personal level, because on a communal level, Jews were, of course, outraged, as we should be. On a personal level, I'm like, hang on. I know these students. I was nothing but progressive and nice and kind, and I wasn't really expecting anything in response. It wasn't so to be reciprocal. But I went to the Muslim student events, and I went to the Jews for Palestine events. I did all of the right things, and I voted for all the right people, and I marched for all the right causes. And the immediate reaction of all my friends and classmates is to then celebrate the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. And as I said, did
they look at you in the face and be like, "Sorry, Shabbos"?
So that's what I was going to get at. I was the only Orthodox Jew at the Divinity School, the only Jew who was wearing a kippah, who kept Shabbat, kept kosher. So I was, not to sound arrogant, but I was relatively known because I was the token Orthodox Jewish kid. I can count on one hand the amount of people who came up to me to say anything. I hope your family's okay. And by the way, I was very vocal, both in the WhatsApp groups and classes that I had family in Israel. I have siblings who live there. I have grandparents. I have aunts, uncles. So I was relatively known. And the Divinity School is not particularly big. It's, I think, 400 or 500 students. It's really not that large. So I was the only kid eating kosher in the corner. People knew who I was. And I can count on one hand the amount of people who came up to me to say much of anything. And again, what makes it so shocking is we're talking about the Divinity School, where they brag about how we train leaders in ethics, in morality, in sensitivity. These are going to be religious leaders who will lead a community. And that, to me, is quite telling of the standard at Harvard Divinity School.
Okay. So you have said this is the standard of Harvard Divinity School. Did this carry over this sentiment into Columbia, into Yale?
Yeah, of course. And by the way, it's not just the standard of Harvard Divinity School, it's the standard of Harvard University. Again, I don't speak for the entire Jewish community. I never once have said that, contrary to what my detractors criticize me of doing. But anecdotally, I can tell you of students at the law school, undergrads at the college, at the medical school, who have told me their stories, who I know personally as friends, and they will have very, very similar experiences as I did. The problem is they're not willing, for reasons I can understand, but they're not willing to speak out publicly. And so that's where I get the criticism of I'm the self-declared spokesman for the Harvard Jewish community, which is not true, and I don't want to be the spokesman. I'm not the spokesman. But when you have only a handful of Jewish students at Harvard who are willing to speak out publicly, then it becomes really complicated.
And we have learned, we've talked about this on shows in the past, there's this body of Jewish work called Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot, and one of the teachings there, it says, in a place that there are no leaders, you have to strive to be a leader. Or in a place where there are no men, you have to stand up to be a man. So when I'm hearing this, and what you're saying is that nobody was speaking out. Nobody was raising a flag saying, hey, this is injustice. Hey, this is awful. Hey, where are the leaders?
Certainly not enough of them were doing it. And again, I so distinctly, very publicly, because the Harvard Jews, we created our own WhatsApp group post October 7th, because we needed community. But I would very publicly say, hey, this reporter from NPR, CNN wants to talk to Jewish students. Who wants to be connected? Or, hey, I'm going to DC to meet with members of Congress. Who wants to come? Or, hey, I'm filing a lawsuit. Does anyone want to be part of it? And by and large, the answer was either no answer or no. And again, I'm not blaming anyone.
Meaning your
to be
fellow
clear.
Jews
Correct.
were not coming with you.
Correct. And again, I'm not blaming anyone. I get why. These are friends of mine. These are good people. I get why they don't want to do it. They don't want the professional backlash. They don't want to lose friends. They don't want to put their name out there. I get it. I'm not criticizing. What I am saying is, personally, I guess I'm venting a little bit. I'm sort of...
It's okay. You can do that on the show.
Thank you.
This is a safe
I'm
place.
sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. It's a bit of a catch-22 because very few people will speak out. So then I decide, okay, I want to speak out. But the more I do that, well, I'll get to that in a second. But the more I speak out, it's like, oh, he thinks he's the spokesman. No, I'm not this, and I don't want to be. I want other people to do it. But in the absence of other people doing it, I'm sort of filling the void. In terms of why, it was obvious. If your community is under...
Did it come from your parents? Did it come morality?
If you want to psychoanalyze me, maybe. Probably my parents, probably
I assume this
God.
is what people want to know. People want to know.
I didn't really think about it.
Because there's a lot of people that will hide under a rock who will say, you know what? It's not me. I'm not that guy. Stockholm Syndrome. There's somebody else who's going to do it.
But Moses, for example, God literally appears to him. So, it's
From
a lot
burning
easier.
bush and says, you're going to go into Paro's...
Yeah. So I didn't have a revelation. I didn't have a particular moment. It was sort of just... I don't know.
Batya didn't snatch you from the river?
No. If only. I don't know. When people say, like, why? I don't know. Maybe if your listeners can psychoanalyze me and tell me subconsciously why I did it. But to me, it was a no-brainer. Probably. But I didn't really think about it. It was just so obvious. If your community, if your people are under attack, you say something. If anything...
So why aren't more people saying something
right so the
now?
real question is, why don't other people do it? I don't know. Again, the answers they've given me, I can understand. But if I were to redo the last 3 years of my life, my only real regret is I was not able to muster a significant mass of people who were willing to be public about their experiences. I wish there was something I could have done differently.
What would that have done if you were to get a mass group of people?
On a total selfish level, I would have stopped being the target of so much criticism and hate. I get death threats weekly. I get horrendous mail and whatever. But on a more practical level, going on the offense, it would have helped our narrative. This is not happening to one kid who's a MAGA fascist and supports the Republicans. It's happening to a broad range of Jewish people from a broad range of socioeconomic backgrounds, a broad range of political ideologies, a broad range of religious observances. It wasn't just a Shabbos Kestenbaum versus Harvard. I mean, literally, the New York Times did a profile on me, and it said the Jewish student who took on Harvard. And
that's a lot of pressure.
Number one, it's a lot of pressure. But number two, it's not about me. It's not about the Jewish student. It's about the Jewish student experiences. And it shouldn't be a profile on me. It should have been a profile on dozens of Jewish students who experienced the exact same thing. But as I said, they didn't want to be part of it. which again, I'm not blaming them. I get it, but it became really, really difficult. And even within the Jewish community, so much of the criticism I get is I'm egotistical, I'm just chasing the cameras and the press, and I like the publicity. And I get if you're a rational observer, you see my name in the papers and you're like, oh yeah, this kind of makes sense. He just likes the attention. But again, if I could go back, I would somehow tried a different strategy of getting more people at Harvard on board.
But even with all the haters, because the haters going to hate, even with all the haters and all the backlash or the death threats, you still manage to get up again. Because you know what, that could still be like, okay, you know what, my life is potentially in danger, or I didn't sign up for this. Again, still, what gets you out of bed to do this?
Well, if I was fighting against anti-Semitism, I would have quit 3 years ago because, one, I'm doing a pretty bad job of fighting anti-Semitism, and number two...
Because people might think that that's what you're doing.
I'm not. And often when I'm introduced to someone who fights anti-Semitism, and then I'll actually correct and say, that's really not what I do. Here's what I do, which is I don't fight against hate, I fight for Jewish values, the Jewish state, Jewish peoplehood. That's what animates me and motivates me, is being part of a really miraculous story of a 3,000-year-old tradition. And I get to be a character, as does every other Jew, get to be a character in that story, and more than that, get to be the author of that story. That, to me, is what's way more impactful and important than, fighting idiots who draw swastikas. So
by you coming on a podcast or you going on Fox News, you're painting a picture of what the Jewish people...
I try. And, there is a lot of pressure because I also wear a kippah. So I know that if I mess up or I do the wrong thing, that the way the game is played, it will reflect not really on me, it will reflect on the Orthodox community. Not because I represent the Orthodox community, but the way outside observers will see it is,
That's how all Orthodox
those
people are.
Kippah wearers... Yeah, they're all the same.
And we've talked about this on the show. There's this idea called Kiddush Hashem versus Chilul Hashem. Kiddush Hashem means to sanctify God's name, to holify God's name. So when we wear this, we're put under a microscope, whether we like it or not. And this is how you as the Jews, as the chosen people, you're meant to show up a certain way. You're meant to be a certain way in the world. And we're going to hold you accountable to that.
Certainly, and that's why there's a lot to talk about in terms of my attitudes towards the media, but on Piers Morgan's show in particular, which is what people are now calling the Jerry Springer of politics, which is chaos, and he loves it. It's so difficult because I am berated. I've been called a bitch. I've been called a Nazi. I've been called evil. I've been called a baby killer. People constantly interrupt me. I can't get a sentence out. But because I'm wearing a kippah, I'm, again, caught between a rock and a hard place, because as much as I want to yell back and I want to interrupt and say, don't interrupt me, I just take it and I don't say anything, and I figure the best course of action. I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm going to remain silent, and I'm just going to take it, and I'm just going to say nothing, and I'll let them yell at me and say whatever they need to say to get off their chest, and then I'll very calmly and rationally explain my position. Maybe that's not the right approach. Maybe Jews actually get very, very mad at me. They say, no, you need to shut her up. My attitude is I can't, because I wear the kippah. I'm representing, fairly or unfairly, a bigger community, and I need to act in a conscientious manner of wearing the kippah.
And I think the enemy wants to see us react versus be proactive. So when you can stop, consider the answer, be silent, and then answer deliberately, you've won. You're not reacting because they want to see your reaction. They want to see you get all flighty and stumble on your words, and they say, we got you.
Yeah. I will say, though, I just made this comment on my Instagram. I think if I die early of high blood pressure, it will be because of far left white liberal women. I don't know what it is about that demographic in particular, but they will not let me finish a single sentence. That particular far left white liberal, it's just unbelievable. I was a part of the Trump campaign, and I had great conversations with people on Kamala Harris's side, and sometimes they could convince me, and sometimes I can convince them, and it was great. But when it comes to Israel-Palestine, I don't know what it is, but I've been unable to have any sort of normal, moderate semblance of a rational discourse and discussion.
So you've gone, I have to ask the question, you went from being a Bernie supporter.
Yeah. I'm doing teshuva though. I'm
Hold on,
repenting.
no. You
So
don't
don't
have
hold
to.
it against me.
I'm not. There's no judgment in this room. I'm just calling a spade a spade.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing is you are a Bernie supporter to, I don't know if I heard this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, to being closely aligned with maybe some teachings that Trump is espousing in the world. So some would say that that's a disparity from being a Bernie supporter, from even you said yourself, maybe in this, and maybe I could have heard it wrong, that you were a liberal supporter, to now being if I could be quoting myself wrong, to maybe being a Trump supporter. How was there a shift, and where did that shift come from, and what created that shift?
Sure. So I don't know if I would call it a disparity. I think I would call it an evolution of being willing and
some people might call it a disparity, but I'm glad that you're.
But it's about being humble enough whereby you are willing to be convinced of other opinions and ideas. And I wish all Americans were like that. You know, if the people on the left or the Democratic Party want me to vote for them, okay, give me an articulate message. Clarify why it is that it would be better for me, for my people, for the American people to vote for your party. And if you can't make that message, which they clearly couldn't do, and on the flip side, the Trump campaign,
why not?
Why aren't they doing that? That's a good question.
Or what haven't they done to?
So I'll answer it by talking about my personal experiences. We had tried, because Joe Biden, of course, was president from October 7th to the following January. We had tried to forget about meeting with Biden officials. I mean, we tried that, and it obviously didn't work. But just getting
you as a representative on Harvard.
Not as a not as a representative of anyone. We being myself and other Jewish students who felt similar to
misrepresented, unheard.
Yes, and not to sound braggadocious.
And by the way, we haven't actually officially said this on the show. It was alluded to, but Shabbos sued Harvard.
Yes.
Sorry, that was maybe that happened.
It happened.
And you sued Harvard for, we're already 40 minutes into the show. You sued Harvard for what?
For their civil rights violations against Jewish students. And actually our lawsuit became the first case in American history pertaining to the civil rights violations of Jewish students on a campus to be allowed to go to trial. It survived the motion to dismiss. That had never happened before. And Kestenbaum v. Harvard has now been cited as legal precedent in half a dozen other cases brought by Jewish students across college campuses. So I'm very, very proud of what we've been able to achieve. But going back to Joe Biden, with the Biden administration in particular, no one from Deborah Lipstadt, who was the White House anti-Semitism envoy, to Shelley Greenspan, who was the White House Jewish liaison, to the Department of Education, to the Department of Justice, none of them did anything. It was a joke. None of them took our complaints seriously. None of them had any semblance of a desire to have structural reforms and hold these universities accountable. None of them. And I'll say it directly. Shame on you, Shelley Greenspan, and shame on you, Deborah Lipstadt, who you had powerful positions and you could have helped us and you chose not to. And it is remarkable that the mainstream Jewish establishment and the Jewish nonprofits continue to host them and put them on a pedestal and tell them how great they are and never once ask them why they didn't do a damn thing to help. But I digress. So while we were struggling with the Biden administration, the Trump campaign reached out in a literal way. They called me, and we had meetings with them.
Representatives.
Yes. And I'll say his name because he's great. Martin Marks, who's now the White House Jewish liaison. To his credit, he called me. Martin, you called me in January even, pretty early on. And to his credit and to the Trump campaign's credit, I said, look, I'm uncomfortable endorsing Trump at this moment in time. I'm a Democrat. I'm a liberal. I like Biden, sort of. And as the months went on, I realized, why am I so averse to endorsing Trump? I don't get this. Because he was telling us exactly what he was going to do to help us. And unfortunately, American politics are exclusively transactional. I wish it wasn't that way, but it just is. The African American community should vote for their best interests, and the gay community should vote for their best interests. And for the first time in Jewish American history, the Jewish community should vote for their best interests. And yeah, I still believe in liberal values. I still believe in aggressive measures to combat climate change. I believe in an aggressive minimum wage. But I also believe we can't talk about those issues if we're dead. We can't talk about any of those issues if Jewish students are being physically assaulted on their campuses. We can't talk about those issues if American citizens are being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza. And that, to me, became the only issue I cared about. And even though I disagree...
And that, pun intended, trumped
Yes, even though I
Everything.
disagree with many things that Trump stood for and many of his policies to
I mean, we
this
can
day.
talk about the ICE raids. We can talk about other things, you know.
Yeah,
And
I'm not necessarily on board with all of his policies, but when it came to the things that I cared about the most, it was a no-brainer. And to their credit, the Trump campaign said, we want you to speak in the Republican convention. And by the way, if you watch my speech at the Republican convention, I don't even endorse Trump. I mentioned his name once, and it's in passing. And then a few weeks later, I went to the Democratic convention, and I said as a Hail Mary, don't have me speak because I'm a MAGA Trump fascist. But here's a list of a dozen progressive Jewish students on college campuses who've been affected by anti-Semitism. Have them speak. Have one of them speak for 2 minutes. Why should the Republicans be the only ones to talk about anti-Semitism? And they said no. So at a certain point, if you're not even going to pretend that you care about our issues, then don't expect us to endorse you and to vote for you. So the Democratic Party, I mean, I remember I wrote an email. I mean, it went nowhere, but I wrote an email to the Biden campaign saying, you guys are going to lose a lot of Jewish votes, and I want to help you. Here's what you should do. And it went nowhere. You know, I was at the Ohel, the grave of the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Bueller.
Yeah. I was at the grave of the Lubavitcher Rebbe on the 1-year anniversary of October 7th with President Trump. It was myself. It was an Auschwitz survivor, Jerry Wartsky. It was with Ben Shapiro. It was the family of Idan Alexander, who was the last living American being held hostage.
Still.
And well, he was released,
Right,
but at
right.
the time he
Yeah,
was. And Kamala Harris was invited. And she said no. And then she was told, okay, well, you could come a different day when Trump isn't there. And she still said no. So at a certain point, you know, and then I endorsed Trump. I realized enough is enough. This is silly. So I endorsed Trump at the Republican Jewish Coalition Conference at Sheldon Adelson's casino in Vegas. And then I started speaking at Trump rallies. And I would travel across the country and I would tell them, here's why, as a Jewish Democrat, I think our only option is to endorse Donald Trump. And I am not only appreciative, I'm blown away at how the promises he made have become promises kept in such a quick, rapid succession, withholding funds to universities, taxing university endowments, lawfully detaining and eventually deporting foreign students who violated American law, criminalizing DEI on public institutions. These are great policies that even in my wildest imaginations, I did not think would get passed and get passed as quickly as it did. So if you're a Jewish American who detests Donald Trump and you think that the Democratic Party is our natural base, then okay, but tell me why. All you guys did for the last 2 years is ignore us and tell us to go F ourselves. That's not an effective campaign strategy.
Drop the mic. It's just mic drop there.
So, you know, by the way, I'll say one other point. When people say, you know, I'm a Trump conservative fascist, you guys made me that way. First of all, I'm not a fascist and misogynist, but like you, the Democrats, you made me endorse Trump. It's your fault because you refused to do anything. So the blame is on you guys.
And it's not like that you tried. You
Correct.
sent emails.
Yes.
You said this is what could help us.
Yeah, we tried getting Biden to understand what the issues on the ground were, and I don't think he knew. And it turns out he didn't know because he was functionally dead. But we had tried, and we just never received any reception. And of course, there was zero structural change. And you see Trump in the 7 months he's been president has gotten so many victories against these universities who are now reforming because of Donald Trump.
Do you have anything to say about Mamdani potentially being?
Yeah, I mean, I'm born and raised in New York City. I'm still a New York City voter, and I think I'm still a resident of New York City. But he's a perfect example of how far left the Democratic Party have become. And honestly, I hope he wins because, as George Will said, we need every 20, 30 years a candidate, a policymaker to remind us why socialism never works. And we haven't really had that in a while.
Even though there might be some pretty extreme things that will happen.
Voters elect the people they deserve. And if New York City wants to elect an individual who wants to have government-run grocery stores, who wants to arrest our greatest ally, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, whoever that happens to be, who wants a free public transportation, who wants to freeze the rents, who wants to eliminate the New York Police Department, who wants to send social workers to dangerous neighborhoods rather than cops. If you want that, I will vigorously campaign against it, and I talk to the camera. I will be voting for Eric Adams, and I'm working with the Adams campaign, and I hope he wins, but I'm not so confident on that. But if the New York City taxpayer wants Zohar Mamdani, they'll come to regret it very, very quickly. And that's not a threat. That's just reality. Having a wounded, handicapped New York Police Department will kill our city. Eradicating billionaires, which he has said, even if you don't like billionaires, will destroy our city. We are the financial capital of the world. These are dangerously stupid ideas. And I'm very concerned. But ultimately, if this is who New York voters want, then the only good outcome I could see is that in 4 years from now, he will have failed so spectacularly, we will never entertain the idea of a socialist mayor ever again. So it's a bit Machiavellian. I mean, I know it sounds very detached, but look, I mean, I hope he doesn't win, and I will do everything I can do in a personal capacity to ensure he doesn't. But if the majority of the New York City populace want him to win, there's nothing I can do about it.
So, and I think this might be one of the last questions that I ask you. And what is the next 5 to 10 year outlook going to look like with Jews around the world?
Oh man!
And I don't know if you're asked that question a lot, but and you say that you're not an activist and you're not fighting anti-Semitism, but I'm not pegging you as one right now. But what is the next 5 to 10 years going to look like? According to Shabbos Kestenbaum, who does have his hand a little bit on the pulse.
No. Don't look for me for advice. You are right. I'm not an activist. I'm not forgetting the second thing you said, and I do not have a crystal ball. But I'm a numbers guy. As much as I study in the humanities and I'm not particularly great at math, I do look at the data, and irrespective of October 7th, the majority of the Jewish people will be living in Israel within 10 years. Currently, it's the plurality of Jewish people. It's like 48% of all Jews live in Israel, and in 10 years, it's going to be 51%. That's not a result
just because of the anti-Semitism that's taking place?
So I was going to say, it's not really because of anti-Semitism. In fact, if you actually look at Nefesh B'Nefesh statistics, for example, the wave of American immigrants who are moving to Israel
Nefesh is the organization which
encourages Jewish immigration to the land of Israel.
Yes.
If you look at their data, there's actually not a lot of American Jews who are moving to Israel. There's not a lot of Canadian Jews, and you would think even post-October 7th there would be a bump. There was a little bump, but it's not much. Jews who wanted to leave America for anti-Semitism basically already left. And by the way, that brings me to a broader point, which is don't run away from something, run to something. Move to Israel because it is our ancestral biblical homeland, the land where Isaac and Abraham and Jacob walked, the land where you can be a transparent, authentic, genuine Jew and not have to compromise your Judaism with your professional space. That's why you should move to Israel, not because idiots on the subways are saying Heil Hitler. Don't run away from something, run to something. Go to Israel because you want to go to Israel, not because you want to leave the US. And by the way, I can speak anecdotally of people who move to Israel because they're escaping. Israel's a pretty tough country. It's a very different culture and lifestyle. A lot of them will end up moving back. It's not easy at all. You have to be a bit of an idealist. So move to Israel because it's a good place to move to, not because you're escaping. Having said that, though, one of the reasons why the majority of Jews will be living in Israel is, number one, just the demographics. The Orthodox community in particular in Israel, especially B'nai Brak, they're having 8-9 kids, whereas secular Jews who eat, who believe a bagel and lox cream cheese bagel is their Judaism, they're having like 1 or 2 kids. So just demographically, Israel's birth rate, in particular with the Orthodox communities, far surpasses the American Jewish community. And number 2, yes, people are moving to Israel, not so much from the U.S. or North America, but from Europe, 100%. And
Paris,
oh my God, France is the best example of this. So that is another reason why the future of the Jewish people is in Israel. In terms of the American Jewish community, as I said, people who have wanted to have left have already left. And I am not leaving. I actually really like being an American. I'm very proud of the fact. I don't know if your camera can see my kippah, but my kippah is an American flag. I actually designed this myself. And if any of your listeners know how to manufacture kippahs, I want to sell them for profit to help afford my rent. But I want American Jews to be wearing kippahs, and in particular, kippahs that show their American patriotism. I'm so blessed and privileged and fortunate to have been born in this country. I love being an American. I love it, love it, love it. And in fact, when I spoke at Trump rallies, I would say, look, in 1790, President George Washington writes a letter to the largest Jewish community in the United States. It was 25 families in Newport, Rhode Island. And he writes it to the Toros Synagogue in Newport, which is still a functioning synagogue. And he says, in the United States, things are different. We want you as Jews to come here as a child of Abraham and practice your religion. Here in the United States, bigotry will be granted, no sanction and persecution, no assistance. And I would say the attendance at Trump rallies. I'd say, forget about Israel, forget about your politics. How shocked and embarrassed and appalled would our founding fathers be to know that American citizens are being denied access to education because of their religious identity? This is an issue that strikes at the core of our American civilization, our liberal values, and our democracy. And America is a place worth dying for, and it is therefore a place worth living for. And I am not ready to throw in the towel because I believe America's best days are ahead of it, and I'm going to fight to ensure that that is the case.
Beautiful. That is what's taking place, God willing, in America. You personally, what's your next 2 to 3 years look like, Shabbos?
Well, I just moved here to Los Angeles. I have a job with PragerU. I'm starting my own show where we'll be discussing religion and politics. But long term, as I said, I don't know specifically what that looks like professionally. Maybe it'll be in politics. I just started a nonprofit, so if any of you want to help me afford my rent in LA, just contact me. And
you can make a plug of what this nonprofit.
Well, we don't have a website yet.
Okay.
Maybe by the time this airs, we'll have a website. But in the meantime, just DM me on Instagram. And as I said, I think earlier in the show, whatever I do professionally, whether it's PragerU in 10 years, whether it's an elected office in 10 years, whatever it is, it's going to be in service of the American Jewish community, and in particular the American people, and that's never going to change.
Amazing. Shabbos, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really feel so blessed to have you. You're extremely articulate, extremely bright, have a lot of wisdom, and I learned tremendously from you today, and thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
We'll do it again. Thank
Amen.
you. Awesome job,
Okay.
man.
Yeah.
Hopefully that was